What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Well, we just saw Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3. It unfortunately ended via injury at the end of the first round. Technically ruled a technical knockout for Dustin Poirier, and then in parentheses they'll put like doctor stoppage. Gruesome injury to the lower leg of Conor McGregor, and unfortunately a very anticlimactic end to a otherwise super action-packed first round. I mean, damn, like what more do you want out of a trilogy fight? We saw some back and forth action. You know, Conor started the fight off with 2 spin kicks, and so he was obviously looking to mix it up and to be pretty unpredictable with his attacks, kind of keeping Dustin Poirier on notice. Dustin Poirier seemed like he was kind of game planning and expecting Conor McGregor to be a little unorthodox and, you know, surprising in the early onset of the fight, so he was prepared for it. And, you know, we saw, you know, Conor starch Poirier with a couple punches early. We saw Poirier come back and, you know, not totally wobble McGregor, but he kind of wobbled him, and you could see that Conor McGregor was thinking about, should I shoot, because he was so lit up by some of those punches. You know, Conor McGregor also landed some very interesting leg kicks, and Dustin Poirier is actually saying that it was one of those attempted leg kicks from Conor McGregor that Poirier checked, and therefore, you know, kind of caught the leg at a weird place where it damaged the structural integrity of Conor McGregor's lower leg, and that at the end of the round, the step back that appeared to, you know, split the leg was actually just the icing on the cake on an otherwise already damaged lower leg. So again, super unfortunate ending. That first round was hellacious. I mean, they traded a lot of leg kicks, and, you know, they even did kind of front kicks to the body. I mean, they were just mixing it up. You know, Conor McGregor, he pulled guard and tried to attempt to sink a guillotine on Poirier, and, you know, to the casual viewer, it looked like Poirier might have been in trouble. Now, his body was kind of on the right side of where it needed to be to avoid getting choked out, but it was a pretty spirited attempt at a guillotine. Unfortunately, since, you know, you can't keep it locked and keep on straining your arm trying to get the choke, otherwise you'll just experience big time muscle fatigue. So Conor eventually let it go, and then he kind of got his ass whooped after that, because then Poirier's head is free. He started raining down with a lot of vicious elbows, just tons of ground and pound. I would say that Conor took a bigger beating in that ground and pound than he even did in that Khabib fight, when Khabib was lighting him up in that second round. Now, Conor would keep on trying to find his opportunities even from the ground to try to get some elbows in from the bottom to the side of Poirier's head. So Poirier did catch a few of those, but again, he just rained hell downward against Conor, which, you know, appeared to be a lot more effective than what Conor was trying to rain upward. You know what I mean? But Poirier at this point, you know, might be just as good a stand-up fighter as Conor. Now, there is, again, the threat of a takedown from Poirier, at least more so than there is from Conor. But, you know, after seeing their first fight back in 2014 and then seeing how Conor performed for the next couple years, the idea was, or traditionally had been, that Conor was a superior stand-up fighter and that Poirier would have to fight a more of a mixed martial arts type of game to be able to beat Conor. Well, you know, that has been the case, but right now, I don't think you could definitively say that Conor is still the superior stand-up fighter over Poirier. One, I think Poirier appears at this stage to be a bit more durable. Again, even with the effective shots that Conor was landing on Dustin, the ones that Dustin was landing on Conor, by the way, you saw that left hand that barely missed for Conor McGregor, that was a pretty nasty punch. But the strikes that seemed to really matter were the ones that came from Poirier that got Conor to kind of back up and then act like he was trying to go for, you know, he lazily kind of almost leaned and laid into Poirier like he was trying to clinch at that point, but then they kind of pushed off of each other to recreate the separation and distance. But man, it looked like Conor was in big trouble a couple times. He took a lot of damage, but it was still a competitive enough round to where we all wanted to see how this thing was gonna unfold. I mean, man, we wanted some closure, and that was a very very exciting first round. I mean, it just took all the oxygen out of the building when, you know, Herb Dean unfortunately had to wave it off because of the damage, you know, that Conor sustained. Bad injury. It's going to take a while for him to recover. You know, they say that this might actually take a little bit less time to recover than for instance, a complete ACL or MCL tear in the knee, ligaments wise. So, you know, I do want to be optimistic that we are going to get Conor back in the cage sometime soon. I mean, if the post-fight interview was any indication of Conor's willingness to continue to fight, seems like he's still all in. And, you know, by the way, I mean, you want to talk about playing up the character. This guy had a shattered leg, or a broken leg, was sitting down on the side of the cage. Joe Rogan comes down to interview him down there, and Conor is still talking super reckless about Dustin, about Dustin's wife. Look, say what you want about, you know, the lack of class or tact from Conor McGregor, but man, I mean, this guy is all in when it comes to playing up that character, even post devastating leg injury, you know what I mean? But man, I mean, dude, look, this was a scrap in that first round. So Conor wasn't here to lay down. You know, every time Conor would get in trouble, he would do enough to get out of the situation and would fight back, would try to do a kick, and then, you know, launch a left hand that might catch him, might miss. I mean, Poirier did have the superior striking stats in that first round, but Conor was, you know, more or less in the fight. And you know that he's always one or two good punches away from kind of turning the tide, but Poirier clearly won the first round. But damn, again, we wanted to see more closure in this trilogy fight than we got. So it looks like this is going to be extended, that if Conor comes back, that he does appear, it looks like he's going to get a fourth fight with Dustin. Now, what we need to see before that is Dustin to get his proper title shot against Charles Oliveira, which it appears we will get probably sometime very late 2021. I mean, Dustin Poirier has kind of been seen as the kind of an uncrowned champion of the division because of the way things have played out post Khabib retirement. Now, Justin Gaethje to me is the wild card here. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with him. I mean, his only recent loss, aside from Poirier a few years ago now, which was a classic in my book. Look up Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje if you want 4 rounds of absolute hell. But Justin Gaethje only lost really in his title shot against Khabib Nurmagomedov, which it looks like everybody gets the Khabib mulligan since nobody beat Khabib. So why is Justin having such a tough time scheduling his next fight? I mean, whether it's against, I don't know, Dan Hooker, Michael Chandler, maybe a Conor McGregor fight, you know, when he returns, even though I don't know if Conor wants a Justin Gaethje fight for his first fight back into the cage after such a bad injury. But I mean, a fight against Dustin Poirier is not going to be any easier. Dustin Poirier insists that Conor has to beat somebody at lightweight, to, you know, somebody good. I mean, don't beat Cowboy Cerrone up at 170. A Nate Diaz trilogy at this point really doesn't count as a super significant win, just because, you know, Nate Diaz isn't ranked anywhere in the top 8 to 10 at lightweight. But could Conor, for instance, get up for a Tony Ferguson fight or a Beneil Dariush fight or something like that? I don't know. Like, I don't know where he is in terms of what fights he will accept versus won't accept. But I will say this. This outcome, as devastating as it is, first of all, just in terms of its, you know, inconclusiveness, this result actually kind of extends Conor's shelf life a bit. Now, look, this is assuming that he's able to come back to, you know, 100%. Look, I don't think that Conor McGregor is still, you know, 2016, 2015 prime Conor McGregor. But whatever he was going into this trilogy match versus Dustin Poirier, because it does appear that he trained well, that he's in good physical shape, that he's, you know, willing to take one and, you know, dish it out. And he does still have a lot of dog in him. Like, he does still have some of what he had in that second fight versus Nate Diaz in this fight. You know, it was back and forth. And again, it looked like Conor was about to get stopped at a couple different points. And, you know, if we had to place odds or probabilities, yeah, he was probably going to get stopped by Dustin if he didn't, pull a rabbit out of his hat with a super devastating punch to turn things around, like only Conor and a few others can. But it looked like he was going to lose this fight eventually against Dustin. Plus, we kind of believe that Dustin has the better cardio and is more durable going into the middle and late rounds. But, because of that, it's almost like this injury was able to preserve the Conor McGregor mystique and to kind of keep that story going. Because if he did truly get stopped by Dustin Poirier in this fight, then the party's kind of over, more or less, in terms of, what our perception of Conor is or was. If he ended up just getting, ground and pounded to a stoppage or getting knocked out cold or tapped out or something, that wouldn't really get anyone super excited to see Conor McGregor's next return. Not to say that there aren't super lucrative fights to be made with Conor, like a Nate Diaz trilogy fight or Conor McGregor versus Rafael Dos Anjos grudge match. I mean, there are fights that you can still make, and Conor is still the most bankable fighter in the sport without question. But our idea of Conor as a super elite fighter, many of us do already still have our doubts right now. I'm one of them. But you can't close that chapter based on how this trilogy fight with Dustin ended. He didn't get stopped in a way that was conclusive. This was an injury. So again, you could kick that can down the road a little bit, hope for as good a recovery as possible, and then we will await Conor's next return. So this might not have been the worst outcome for Conor McGregor. I don't think this was by any stretch the most satisfying win for Dustin Poirier. Yes, he did sound like, no, man, I did what I had to do. I got my hand raised, and he tried to put as positive a spin on it as possible. And again, in fairness, Dustin did win that first round and had Conor, beaten up in several different parts of that round. Again, competitive round, but a clear round for Dustin Poirier. And I don't know if Conor was going to make it past the second round, but this wasn't a satisfying win for Dustin Poirier. Like, he did have his moments. He did put a, pretty good beating on Conor. He did and does appear to be the better fighter between the two. I mean, I think if we had to take a poll, most people would believe right now that Dustin Poirier is a little better than Conor McGregor. But this couldn't have been the resounding win that Dustin Poirier had envisioned to close the Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor saga. You know what I mean? So it looks like Dustin's going to go and fight for the title versus Oliveira, which will at least continue to move things along in the lightweight 155-pound division. And then we'll see what happens with the Conor return. We'll see who they eventually match Justin Gaethje up with next. But man, that was a blistering first round. I think that everybody who was watching that fight had to be thoroughly entertained by what they were seeing. These guys came to scrap, and the fight felt personal. As you're watching the fight, you can see how vicious their strike attempts are and what they're looking to do. Like, just the amount of leg kicks that were thrown, because leg kicks are kind of becoming the unspoken, oh man, why you got to do that? It's a mean weapon because of the pain that is administered to the person who's receiving the leg kick as well as to the person who's throwing the leg kick. So there is a level of I don't give a F when you are willing to start throwing leg kicks to the inside leg, outside leg, switch stances and throw kicks with the other leg. Like, there is a level of, hey, I'm willing to suffer. And Poirier said that at the end of the fight. He said straight up, I'm willing to suffer more than this guy. I know I'm willing to suffer more than this guy at the end of the day. And man, Dustin's a cold brother, man. Because, yeah, that fight did feel personal. You saw, them exchanging elbows, the work that they were both doing when the fight did go to the ground. This was a vicious first round, and that just adds to the, oh, man, when the fight was stopped. Because the crowd and the viewers were certainly getting our money's worth. And you just don't want to see a fight end without a, proper punctuation. Or at least let it go to the scorecards and let the judges decide who should get their hand raised. But man, this will invoke a lot more discussion about you know, the greatness of Dustin Poirier. Like, let's give it up. Like, when you look at his resume at this point, he has beaten Justin Gaethje. He's stopped Showtime Pettis back when Showtime wasn't totally washed. I mean, I think it was still a post-prime Showtime Pettis, but he wasn't done in the way that he is now. And Dustin has now won 2 out of 3 officially against Conor McGregor, and you know, a bunch of other key wins as well. You know, after Dustin lost in his title challenge against Khabib, I was wondering how the rest of the Dustin Poirier story in the UFC would unfold, and man, it is shaping up pretty nicely. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. What did you think about that first round? How dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the way that it ended? Where did you see the fight trending? Like, what did you, as you're watching the fight, without, you know, just prior to the accident, the injury, what did you think was about to transpire in that cage? And who do you favor at this point between Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira? Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.